Now, since an interview on this programme 3 weeks ago, a debate has been raging about homophobia, what the word means, who gets to use the word, and should we maybe exclude it from the upcoming debate on same-sex marriage. So we're joined tonight by Colm O'Gorman, Senator Averil Power, Noel Whelan and Susan Phillips, and we'll also hear from some people in our audience. Now, before we begin, I just want to outline some parameters for the discussion tonight. Obviously, as we've seen over the last few weeks, this is a really difficult and emotive issue. So we've asked all the speakers tonight to discuss the issue in very general terms. We've asked that they refrain from accusing any specific person of being homophobic or calling anyone a homophobe, especially, obviously, people or groups who are not in the room. And they've all agreed to that. We're going to try and have a respectful discussion where we all listen to each other. And one final thing, for anyone wondering, we did ask John Waters and Breed O'Brien, David Quinn and other members of the Iona Institute to appear, however, they declined. So, Colm, you're the only gay man on the panel with us, so maybe we'll come to you first. I suppose, Colm, people...
Quite the distinction, isn't it?
Well, yeah.
I thought you were going to say in the village for a moment. Don't worry, I won't start speaking Russian after. It's going to be all right.
Yeah, please don't. We don't need a translator for you. No. Listen, Colm, I suppose people feel that in the last few weeks we've got a taster of the opening salvo in the marriage equality debate, and that it's been fairly kind of nasty, and nobody wants a year and a half of this carry on. What do you think about the conduct of the debate so far?
Well, to be honest, I'm kind of stunned at where we're at. I wonder about what we mean by nasty. I mean, you know, one of the things that I'm most concerned about is that suddenly that word, homophobia, has taken on a power and a force that seems to, you know, that if you talk about it, if you suggest that it might be a factor in some of the positions that people adopt, that you're accusing them of being almost demonic. And I mean, the simple reality is homophobia exists right across Irish society. It's a phenomenon that's part of our history, part of our culture. It's something we need to address about ourselves, as indeed are many other examples of, you know, ingrained discrimination and prejudices that we hold towards other people. And I think we have to be able to talk about it on that level without people, frankly, becoming so defensive as to try to almost demonise the idea of the conversation. I mean, I'll give you an example of what I mean. The Department of Education and Science carried out a study recently, and it reported that 79% of Irish teachers were aware of homophobic bullying in their classrooms. Trinity, the Child Research Centre at Trinity, in a piece of research for the Excellent Belong To, who do a lot of work in schools around homophobia, did a piece of research, and they found out that 20%, 1 in 5 of LGBT people under 25 have attempted suicide. And they found a direct correlation between homophobic bullying and those suicide attempts. So we have a very, very significant problem. And homophobia and homophobic expression exists on a spectrum from subtle to extreme. But we're all capable of holding prejudiced views. And my big concern is that suddenly this is the word that doesn't speak its name. And actually it's something we need to be able to talk about. And people need not to be so defensive about it. I mean, when did somebody holding up a mirror and asking us to look at ourselves become such a threat to ourselves that, and I'm not talking about any individuals, don't worry, that we all rush either to law or to judgment or to hysteria in response to that question? It's an important question.
I suppose that there is a feeling among a lot of people. Noel, you wrote about this in the Irish Times last week, that the very using of that word, that it's a very potent word, homophobia, and that you would have argued last week that, you know, you're in favour of same-sex marriage, but you argued that that word actually shuts down the debate.
I think it's unfortunate that a year and a half back from the referendum that we've had kind of hysteria on both sides of this debate. My central point is that I do not accept as a proposition that anyone who opposes marriage equality or potentially the proposition that anybody who is apprehensive about marriage equality or undecided about marriage equality is in some way homophobic. Phobic is whether it's about spiders or open spaces, is something that conjures in the mind a terror or genuine fear. Colm is right. The prejudice against lesbian and gay transgender people is something that is a problem, has to be addressed, has to be spoken, has to be confronted, and will have to be spoken and confronted before and after the referendum. My concern as an advocate of marriage equality, and I don't claim to be, I can't claim to be a leading advocate or to have, in a sense, the issues in this referendum that Colin and others have, because for them it's very real and very personal. But as an advocate of marriage equality and as somebody who's been through, over the last quarter of a century, I think about 15, 20 different referendum processes, some of them as a participant, my concern is that in a year and a half's time we'll be sitting in some studio down the corridor here, watching the results coming in and calling that the referendum has been lost.
Well, and because of things like the use of the word homophobia. Because
that the Irish people buckled back against an effort to corral them or shepherd them into a place where they can't even utter their apprehensions. I'm saying, let's hear those apprehensions. Let's debate those apprehensions. Let's confront those apprehensions. Let's reject those apprehensions. Let's put evidence on the table against those apprehensions. But let them speak, or you won't negotiate the majority that's needed. What's unusual about Ireland is that this issue is actually going to go to the people in a referendum. Now, some might regard that as unfortunate, but it's the constitutional legacy. It's the bar on same-sex marriage is written into the Constitution. It has to be changed and redefined in the Constitution. I think it probably will. I think the people are at a place. I don't believe they're anywhere near 70% like the polls suggest. But I'm saying if you engage, but those of us who want to change the constitutional status quo and decades of perception about what marriage means have to negotiate, persuade, debate and argue with those who are of a different view.
Okay, but then, yeah, go on, Avril.
The only people who have closed down debate so far are those who there were comments made on this programme a few weeks ago, and in response to that, instead of taking the opportunity to come on the programme this evening, or instead of taking the opportunity to respond to those comments elsewhere in the media, people instead went for absolute censorship. So we ended up in a situation where instead of having a debate...
Well, hang on now, let's be careful here. Did they go for censorship? They would say they were defending their good names, and they were vindicated by the fact that they did get a settlement.
No, there was
vindicated. There was no vindication. No. There was RTE making a decision to settle a case for whatever reason we don't know, and to use taxpayers' money to do it.
Well, I think the reason is probably... Look, I'm not here as a spokesman for RTE. The reason is probably RTE took legal advice on this, and clearly the legal advice they got was to settle it, agree or disagree with that.
And there's been other... And that's the decision that RTE made. There has been alternative legal advice put forward by leading barristers over the last few weeks who have argued that that was wrong. But in any event, all I'm saying is the only people who have shut down debate and censored anybody so far are those who oppose equality. Because what happened was, when the video was taken down of the show, you ended up with people making all kinds of claims about what had been said who hadn't seen the show and were very unrepresentative and very unfair to the comments that were actually made.
But hold on,
you can't have a debate.
You can't argue those who advised RTE didn't see the tapes. Those who advised RTE took a view, and I think they're probably right, that it may be borderline, but when you hung that allegation on specific individuals, it was every possibility that a jury of ordinary citizens in a year and a half's time the High Court was going to take a view it was like.
Are you not concerned, Noel, that asking people to check their attitudes and to check whether or not prejudicial or discriminatory beliefs or even bigotry might underpin an attitude, that in and of itself becomes defamatory?
But that wasn't the defamatory part of the discussion on the programme 2 weeks ago. I have, and I watched it again this evening, precisely for that reason. I watched it again precisely this evening.
But no, in fairness, you did write in your piece that you hadn't seen it. You were acting on second-hand reports.
I've spoken to family, friends, and indeed gay rights activists who had seen it.
But all I'm saying is that's the problem. But if you have
guys,
you have to watch the clip to realise that the defamatory parts weren't the part.
Okay, we could go round about this. It's not really the issue tonight. I want to bring Susan in. Susan?
To me, this is an issue of freedom of speech. We're facing a referendum, and in our constitution, if we want to alter an article, in this case Article 41, which implies at the moment that marriage is between man and a woman, if we want to alter that, and we might, we can go to referendum and we can have a debate. But at present, if I have an opinion, and I have to confess that I have a rather traditional opinion on marriage, it probably comes from my experience of a very good marriage over many years, that's my traditional opinion. But if I so much as appear on a show as I have, I am vilified, I am criticised, I receive Twitter messages, the likes of which I wouldn't like to share with any of you. And all I'm saying is can I not have an opinion? Because it's a matter with social implications for families, for children, for social stability. I'm not biased. I'm
Susan,
not hypocritical.
Susan, can I ask?
Yeah.
Sorry, just a second, Colin. Can I ask you, Susan? So, have you been called a homophobe?
I've been called far worse.
And do you find it? Is it
I
very?
find
Is that word? Does that shut down?
It does, because to me, somebody who's homophobic is critical, unkind, biased, and I'm just not. I just want the opportunity
Sorry,
and
Brendan,
the space.
just let
I just
Susan
want
finish,
the opportunity to have an opinion as a rather traditional person. Let's face it, I'm probably old-fashioned, I'm probably way out, but let me say my bit.